Hi, I'm Joe Iconis, and I'm so excited to be here tonight celebrating, honoring, and hopefully raising some cash for New York Theater Barn. Before we have a stimulating, delightful roundtable discussion, I thought we could make a drink, a cocktail, and I thought we could drink that cocktail so we're nice and lubricated for the roundtable discussion. The drink that we're going to make tonight is near and dear to my heart because it is a cocktail that was created by Tracy Egan that is named after a musical of mine. The cocktail is called the Two-Player Game, and it is inspired by my musical Be More Chill. Here's what we're going to use to make our cocktail. The most important ingredient is Empress Gin. The reason that this is the most important ingredient is because the thing that makes this cocktail special is the color. And if you'll notice, Empress Gin, it has like a really cool indigo color. I've been told that this color is 100% natural. It's made with a flower called butterfly pea blossoms. How cool is that? I don't even know what that is, but it sounds sweet. We're gonna use cucumber tonic water, Fever Tree, if you can get it. We're gonna use some ice, which is just cold water that has solidified. And we're gonna use some lemons and cucumbers. If you have a fancy bar spoon, that's amazing, but if you don't have a fancy bar spoon, don't feel bad about it, because you can just use any old normal spoon. Okay, let's make the drink. So I filled a wine glass with some ice. If you have a really big wine glass, that would be ideal, like left over from the community theater production of Mame. That's what you want. If you don't have a big wine glass, a cute little wine glass like this will do. Look at that cute ass wine glass. Ooh. So we're going to use 2 ounces of Empress Gin. That's probably more than 2 ounces what I just poured in there. That's alright. So there you'll notice the beautiful indigo color. Ooh. And then we're going to pour in our Fever Tree cucumber tonic water. You're supposed to pour 3 to 4 ounces of the tonic water. I'm just going to eyeball it. It's kind of like equal parts. But look, the color's going to change. The color's changing. Oh my god! If you'll notice, the color's gone from a beautiful indigo to a deep purple. And this is kind of why this is sort of a Be More Chilly drink. You know, like the official show colors of Broadway were, they were indigo and purple and kind of neon pink. And it's, you know, it's a drink that it's essentially just a gin and tonic, but it's a classic that is elevated. It's a classic that has a geeky neon sci-fi spin to it because of the color, which is very much what Be More Chill was like. We're gonna add our garnish. So we're gonna add some lemon wheels. I did a really bad job of cutting the lemon wheels nice and thin. They should be nice and thin. But I wasn't paying attention because I was talking to you. And throw the cute little cucumbers in there. Stir it up. It kind of looks Halloween-y too. It looks sort of like a prop they would use in a community theater unauthorized production of Hocus Pocus. Look at that beauty. And there you have it. The Two-Player Game named after Be More Chill, the musical. Drink up, be well, stay safe, and I'll see you pretty soon.
Good evening. I'm Joe Barros, and I'm the proud artistic director of New York Theater Barn. For the past 13 years, we have created a home for original culture-shifting musicals during incubation. In the midst of a global pandemic, the company has pivoted evolving our programming and storytelling systems to continue supporting artists and the development of new musicals. The experience has been productive, meaningful, and has connected so many artists and audiences from all over the world. Since March, we have presented 56 new musicals, lifted up the work of 94 writers, and made space for over 250 artists. We are grateful that our live virtual programming was recognized by the National Alliance for Musical Theater's Innovation and Exploration Fund. We also launched the Virtual Hybrid Fund for New Musicals and initiatives to support projects that thrive at the intersection between theater and film, and with our friends Broadway Virtual and Broadway On Demand. We also launched Theater Barn Records, a new imprint of Broadway records and dedicated to new musicals in development. 3 weeks ago, we co-released our first album, Willow, with Broadway Records. Since its release, the album has over 300,000 streams on Spotify and debuted at number 7 on the Billboard Cast Album chart. Tonight's presentation will conclude with the debut of a music video from the Willow creators and their performers collaborating and recording the album together. As an anti-racist nonprofit theater company that actively seeks out and curates important culture-shifting stories from communities we need to hear from, our team has been meeting to discuss ways for our organization to further develop anti-racist culture. Tonight's roundtable discussion is a part of this work. Tonight's legendary artists will take up space to collectively investigate, inspire, and ignite the future of the American theater. New York Theater Barn is committed to creating a safe space to have uncomfortable conversations comfortably and believes that there is a place for all of us at the table of the American theater. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight's moderator, New York Theater Barn's own Héctor Flores, Jr.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to A Seat at the Table. I'm Héctor Flores, Jr., president of Theater Barn Records, and I'll be moderating tonight's discussion. Before we jump in, I would like to take a moment of silence in honor of the life and legacy of celebrated Broadway performer Doreen Montalvo. Seguirás en mis recuerdos para siempre. Thank you for joining us tonight. This is a space for us to re-examine how we communally look at an art form that we hold so dearly. How each of us fits as a piece to a much more elaborate and vibrantly colorful puzzle. To candidly talk about the experiences that we've had that were triumphs and also the ones that make us uncomfortable. The focus of tonight's presentation is to share ideas and experiences, to hear from different departments and cultures that are bringing their shared knowledge to the table to collectively explore the best ways for us to move forward. And now, joining me at the table are Kirsten Childs, Ken Davenport, Joe Iconis, Byork Lee, Jerry Mitchell, Daniel J. Watts, and Stephanie Ibarra. Welcome to the barn, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. I want to congratulations to Daniel J. Watts on his Tony nom.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
And if you guys are ready, I want to jump right in. So the state of the world is pretty crazy right now. We're in this global pandemic, Black Lives Matter, systemic racism, social injustice, and then all of that wrapped up into or culminating with our industry being shut down in an unprecedented way for essentially what is an undefined amount of time. Daniel, I'd like to know from you, what advice would you give your 18 to 20-year-old self if you were trying to break into the business today?
Stop. Don't. No. Keep going. You're on the right track. You know, you're going to hit some falls on the way, but just don't stop dreaming. Remember to keep dreaming. That's important.
Anybody else?
Well,
Think
I would say don't give up your dream, but also be sure that you go to college. Because
And
in the olden days, we were just taught just come to Broadway and get into a Broadway show or come and study. So I say go to college, get those 4 years.
And
Jerry?
as crazy as this pandemic is, this has been a kind of a remarkable time for young people to connect with professionals in our business, because there's so much access over the internet. I know I've been speaking to a lot of kids, schools, classes, teaching. And I just think it's an amazing. I was teaching the other day, and there were these kids, and they were in their garage dancing. And I sort of, there were like 75 kids learning, and I pulled them out, and I said, "Are you in your garage?" And they said, "Yeah. We had our dad park the car out. We're dancing in the garage." I said, "Go for it." I remember dancing in my basement with my tap shoes because it's the only place I could make a sound. So, it's an amazing chance for them to access us and us to access them and be inspired by them.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would say, just answering what I would say to my young self. I mean, first of all, the industry is so different from now than, it was not computer technology like it is now, so, it was completely different. But I would say just have as much fun not knowing a damn thing about theater and just jump right in.
Yeah.
What do you have to lose? And you've got everything to gain.
And I read a quote from the incredible Billy Porter that I threw on my Instagram today. That is the advice that I actually give myself today. Never mind when I was 18, 20, and I'll just read it because it's right there. I'm a living witness that dreams do come true, even if they aren't the ones you start out with. And I was told when I was in college to follow the road wherever it takes you. I think that was my acting teacher who was very subtly trying to tell me you're not that good. So maybe you should look at something else. But I think it's about that. It's if you love the theater, you'll work in the theater. It just may not be exactly where you think by the time you get later on in your life.
Nice.
And going to college will help you. Yeah.
Listen to my York.
Go to college, kids. Stay cool. So my next topic was actually brought up from an interview that I was watching. I was watching Audra McDonald in an interview, and the interviewer asked her what was a piece of advice that really stuck with her, and what she said really struck me and stuck with me. And she said something to the effect of, because you're a woman of color, you're going to have to be twice as good to be considered the same. So I'd like to hear from the ladies on the panel. Bayer, can we start with you? How does that resonate with you, and how?
Well, I'm a special case because I'm 4'10", and I'm a woman of color, and so I had to jump higher, turn faster, kick higher, jump in front of everybody in order to be seen and to represent. So it's true. You have to be better. You really do, in order to be seen.
That resonates. Yes. Full stop. I think I've gone my, if I were talking to my 22-year-old self, I would show her the slinky I keep in my office to remind myself that life and careers are not linear, that they are like a slinky. And yet every decision I feel like I've made in my career, not every decision, but so many of the decisions I've made in my career have been in service of understanding that at every turn, somebody was going to underestimate me. And so I needed to sort of buoy myself to make sure that I was underestimated less.
Kirsten?
Yeah. Frankly, it's for a lot of people. It's for a whole bunch of different people of color. Also, there's some white people that it resonates with, but basically it is the talk that people used to have. People talk about the talk now, about how young women should not run if if there's a policeman or whatever. When I was growing up, that was what professional and non-professional people told their children. You are going to have to be 3 times as good to just be, considered good, sort of good. And you're just going to have to deal with it. And,
So what do we do to change that? How can we be all perceived on the same level when we walk in the door? Let the talent and the work speak for itself. Why does the color of your skin or your gender?
Well, I mean, that question cannot be answered by me.
So what do you think we can do to change that?
Well,
the
it's
only thing I
normally
can think of is for someone to recognize how shameful that is. But I already recognize how shameful it is. But I have also used it to further advance my particular agenda, which is to get things out there so that other people can benefit from what I'm doing. I mean, basically, I tell this story about writing, wanting to write a musical for Black people, because the only musicals that we were relegated to were either the one Black person in the all-white musical, the all-Black version of the white musical, or just a musical that was a musical review with no book. And so I thought, well, I'm going to write a musical, and I know that other people are not going to think that I'm good enough to write it. So they're going to actually write a musical to show me how good I'm not, which actually was part of my plan too, which would be that there would also be my musical and another musical for Black people. So I mean, like I always used those things that were considered obstacles to try to actually figure out how I could use them to my advantage. But in terms of people changing that's not up to me. That's up to people to look at themselves and say, this is wrong. So aside from that, I wouldn't know how to answer that.
Daniel, are you with us? Are you frozen?
Oh yeah, I'm here.
I think you had something you wanted to say.
I was just gonna piggyback. Kirsten said it perfectly. It's not up to the people on this side of the table to decide whether or not they're going to be allowed to be a part of the table. It's who's on the other side of the table making the decisions, who's in the administrative positions, who's producers, who's creating the creative team, who allows the work to be done. So if everyone on that side of the table looks the same, they're making the decisions as to who gets to sit, perfectly named.
Which is an interesting conversation that we've also been having at New York Theater Bar. And I raised the topic of the fact that a lot of the times the room that is making the decision, or the people in there, are not a diverse enough room to collectively support the world in which that we live in today. You know what I'm saying? So if everybody in the room,
I think you're absolutely right. And I think that this pandemic has given us all a chance to check ourselves at the door. I know that my development of what I'm moving forward with is certainly taking all of that into consideration with every decision I've made. But even when I look back at the things that I've done and how I've surrounded myself, I'm always looking for whoever's the best in the room, And gender or color shouldn't play a part in that for me. And I think maybe it's best expressed for me, and I have the most freedom in my benefit Broadway Bears, because I'm allowed to invite the entire community. I don't necessarily hire people to be in Broadway Bears. I just say, I'm doing a benefit for the community and I want everyone to participate. And if anyone says they want to be a part of it, I think it's my responsibility to find a place for them. And that has always been the rule for Broadway Bears for 30 years. So that should apply to commercial theater. That should apply to commercial theater and to creative process in commercial theater most of all. So I was actually speaking to Billy because there was talk at one point where the character of Lola would not be a Black man, and I said, no, I'm casting a Black man as Lola. I want to have that representation on stage, and I wanted that representation in the Angels also, because I've spent a lot of time in drag clubs, and I happen to know the makeup of what's in the club, and I wanted that reality on stage. So, but you have to be willing to speak out in front of your collaborators. You have to be willing to say, I want this. If you're in the power to do that as a director and choreographer, or anyone, a producer, and also we have a responsibility to, if we're fortunate enough to be in that position, to look around what's happening in the real world and then try to get the best representation of that into our stories, if that's what we're going to do. So it's and this pandemic has given us a chance to really look at it, and I think people are going to. I know, so I certainly am. I've been talking to a lot of friends in the business, and T. Oliver Reed, has started a wonderful thing about trying to find access, and Corey has started a scholarship program, which is sensational, and yeah, it needs to happen.
So the next thing on my list is racist material versus racist practice. What do we do with landmark materials that are essentially racist and kind of offensive?
Well, I can just tell you that my career is, the foundation of my career is The King and I. I started at 5, and I've directed productions, and there are many, many Asians who came to New York, and the only work that they had was The King and I. And so now, people, there's talk about, this show is being racist, and should we be doing it, or shall we just throw it away? And I think it's, it's really up to the actor if they want to perform in it. But also, I think in the future, what will happen is that people like David Henry Wong and the Richard Rogers and Hammerstein estate, they may make a few changes, but to absolutely put it on the shelf and never have it seen again, I think that would be for the Asian community, because we only have 4 shows. We have King and I, South Pacific, Flower Drum Song, and Miss Saigon. That's it. So if you feel that they're racist, you better get another career.
Or maybe more writers.
Yeah.
Or maybe more writers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of really great musicals. I mean, if you talk to Joe Barros, I'm sure he can give you like a Rolodex worth of new musicals that are almost ready to be produced. But a lot of the times we get more revivals of West Side Story. You know what I mean? As amazing as it is, and as awesome and as much of a landmark musical as it is, there's really offensive things in the script that happen. And it's like, no matter what the Sharks do, the script is written that the Jets will always be on top. They're not at a level playing field. And I feel like it's great, and we should definitely have that show in educational settings. I don't think we can forget about it. I appreciate it putting Puerto Ricans on the map, being a Puerto Rican myself, but the portrayal of it and how we're in it is not necessarily the best. So it's like, what do you do with that? Do we keep reviving that?
Well, I personally find revivals. I mean, look, I did La Cage aux Folles and Gypsy, right? In my 40-year career on Broadway, I've done 2 revivals. I don't seek out to do revivals. Not that I don't appreciate the work or the writing that was originally written in the period it was written and what it was trying to say, but I'm much more interested in pursuing new stories and new ideas. And
you would like New York Theater Barn.
Well, I got 2 new ones, so we'll talk. But it's, that's where I find. I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but that's where I find the joy is working on new ideas. I
think that's such an interesting point, because when we forget that the musical theater is a relatively young art form, right? Showboat 1929, Oklahoma was 40. Like but we're getting to 100 years, 75 years, when perhaps a lot of these shows, we're just getting to a new era of thinking, and we are beyond them now. I think I'm the same way, and I've done some revivals. I was company manager of Gypsy with Jerry and produced a few myself. But I've started to think, like, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do new stuff. I only want to do new things, because I think we're getting now we're just past, the art form has now reached its sophomore year, junior year, whatever you want to call it, that we've gone on, and it's time to step away. The only other thing I'll say, for some of those shows that we do feel, we want to keep in the repertoire, I'm in the theater because it isn't permanent. I'm in the theater because it can change, it can be adjusted, it can evolve, it can deal with what we're dealing with right now. I think that's what's great about it. It doesn't have to be a movie or a novel that's printed and put, and that's the way it is. We can make whatever changes we want to make to adapt to the time that we're living in.
Yeah, I think it's important to also, I mean, I'm one, I don't like throwing out history. I think it's very important that we know where we came from, so we don't repeat it. And I think it's very important that when we're dealing with shows, we look at the voices of the people in the story, and we make sure that those voices are represented on the other side of the table. Because, like The King and I, what's wrong with The King and I is that there's no one who has the voice of the Asian community from, it was Burma at the time, right? I believe King and I, there's no one on that side of the table with that voice. There's no one, like, I wouldn't be writing and directing and choreographing Fiddler if I can't draw from that. It needs, and you have these people who have never had these experiences. There's no reason for people to be writing about the experiences of Black people in Showboat if they never experienced life with slaves. Like, and that's been the problem. It's like, who's telling the story?
And that brings me to my next point. It kind of baffles me, because sometimes I see a show, or I see people at an audition for a show, and I think to myself, okay, like Dreamgirls, I love it, but it's not my story to tell. So I'm not going to go and audition for it. But like, when does an artist look at the work and look at themselves and say, maybe this isn't my story to tell? Have any of you ever felt that way?
Always. Just think, what is missing?
This week. I mean, yeah.
However,
Always.
you have a whole world. I'm in Japan a lot. I'm in Korea. And they are doing companies of Showboat because they want to sing the songs. They want to tell the story. They want to be a part of what we've created. You know, we are the musical theater, and they are performing all the time. And that's one of the reasons why my company, a National Asian Artist Project, we found a platform for our Asian artists to be able to perform in those shows, because they would never be cast in those shows.
I think that's different. Go ahead, Kirsten.
No, I was just going to say it's difficult, because I mean, I think you have to remember where people were in history. I mean, like Hallelujah Baby, Leslie Uggams would never have been, shown if is it Compton and Greenwood, Hallelujah Baby? I think they did. Maybe I hope I'm not. Anyway, somebody wrote Hallelujah Baby, and Leslie Uggams' A Star Was Born. I mean, but they were not Black, these people that wrote this, and they made that decision to say, I want to see somebody else represented here. Is that a bad thing? Maybe it's not valid right now for people, but prior to that, she would have gotten a chance. So how do we negotiate that, I guess, is my question.
I just want to jump in to offer up that it's not just about representation, that there are actual we know there are financial consequences and implications for who is sitting at what side of the table and whose name is in the billing block. And those financial implications, they follow the piece, hopefully to its run on Broadway and through the licensing forevermore. And so what we're doing, just to put a finer point on it, when we have white authors writing for other cultures, and we're not producing BIPOC writers at the same, or if we're not correcting for that disparity, we're perpetuating the income gap and the wealth gap in our country. And when we're
No
not
question.
hiring BIPOC actors and performers on those stages, we're perpetuating not just the income gap, but now when we're talking about actors' equity, we're perpetuating the sort of lack of access to healthcare. These are not just about, it is about representation, but it's about the economics as well. And we are a microcosm of our country. So I hope that's not.
Yeah, I hope that you're not hearing what I hope that you're not interpreting what I'm
down on what you're saying, Kirsten. I'm doubling down. I'm saying yes, and that it's. I just don't want to let us off the hook with just about representation, because there are people who make money off of these stories, and they go on to make money off of these stories for their whole lifetime. And there are people who are not making money off of these stories.
Right. Absolutely.
On that note, I think we have to take a pause right here and do a little donor acknowledgement. So if all our panelists can look into their chat, it should be on the right side of your screen. Just pop that open. At this time, we'd like to take a moment to thank all of our donors who really supported this event. It's because of the generous donations by art supporters like you that allows us to keep creating. So if we can go down the list.
I think I'm first.
Yes, you are.
Deborah Berra and John Borst. I'm thanking you.
Thank you, Ann Dallin and Mercedes Ellington. Thanks.
And then Buyer.
I missed the directions. What am I supposed to do?
You're going to tap the chat on the right-hand side of your screen.
Yeah.
And then say thank you to the names that are by your name.
Robin Gorman Newman and Daniel C. Levine.
Kathy Mara and Sheila Ray, thank you.
Edward Reap and C. Khan.
And thank you, Juanita Russell.
Adina Schechter and Angela Greenwood. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
New York Theater Barn is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and any gifts that you make tonight or in the future are tax deductible. So please visit nytheaterbarn.org/give to make your donation today. So, what do you feel about the cancel culture that's spreading across everywhere, and do you think the pendulum is swinging too far? Are we not forgiving of people who make a mistake anymore?
Hey, Hector, is it cool if I double back to the last topic? I was just about to say something. Amazing. I'm going to do it. Just to be, as a writer, I think the idea of who is telling the stories and what stories are they telling, it's something that I, struggle with literally every day. And it's such a wild thing, for me at least, in that I'm a cis white man, and I don't only want to tell stories in the musical theater about cis white men. And it's really tricky. It's always been tricky, and it's especially tricky now to figure out how to navigate that. In the last two shows that I did, they were characters whose life experience could not have been different from my own. The characters who looked nothing like myself, and it was challenging to try to to try to respect and value the life experiences of the people who I was dramatizing, and it's hard to know how to do that, and it's like, I think you try to put as many human beings in the room who can actually speak to that experience, of course. But it's a weird sort of, it's a weird thing. I don't even have a point about that, but I just wanted to.
You said the word respect, and I think that's a really important word for any creative artist when you're working on material that isn't necessarily exactly of who you are. if you're telling a story, or if there's a story that you're passionate about or something you want to write, how do you do that? How do you tell it? You have to have respect for the characters, for the story that's being told, and for the way you're going to approach that work, and surround yourself with the people who will help you tell it authentically. When I was doing On Your Feet, I chose to have Sergio Trujillo as my choreographer because I didn't wake up doing the salsa, but Sergio did. And I knew that he would be able to deliver the authenticity of the choreography. And I'm a choreographer, but that was the decision. So I think that's part of the respect, is part of the job when you're facing the material or trying to create the material.
I think there's also a difference between having the world of a play be populated with all of the people and co-opting a story. And like West Side Story is actually a beautiful example of that. Like that co-opting a culture and appropriating it and unintentionally doing a lot of harm to, when you're representing when the story is about that culture, feels like a different ball of wax than the world of my show has all of the people in it.
Ken, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, look, I'll say a few things. First of all, just about my own personal experience through all this. About nine months ago, if you had come to me and said, would you like to speak on this panel? What do you know about this issue on a scale of 1 to 10? I would say, well, I worked on Showboat. I worked on the original company of Ragtime. I produced Godspell and Once on This Island. I probably am I'm a 7 out of 10. And I think what I've learned over the last 3 months is I don't know a fucking thing. Not a thing. Just nothing at all. And to this point, and this is what I've been trying to do myself throughout this whole process, is to learn more. And I've learned a couple things: that I won't produce a show about people of color without people of color sitting beside me, for sure, as a partner, not even under me, as a partner. If I choose to do that, if it's appropriate for me to do that. And certainly if it's about the issue about creating a show about a different culture, there's two parts. One, I don't think it's appropriate if there aren't people of that culture creating the show. Two, from a purely commercial producer perspective, if you will, it's not going to be as good. Like I've heard, it's just will be better. We live in an age now of authenticity and transparency and honesty. And I believe today's audiences want authenticity. They want things that feel real to them. Shows will feel more real if the creators of those shows are representative of the cultures that are on the stage and the story that it's about. So it's actually a commercial decision, I believe. It's both a social position and also a commercial one to actually, if you're developing a show about a different culture, to surround every aspect of the team and have it filled with people of that culture.
I also think too, it's if you're doing a show and there are people of color on the stage in the cast, it's about giving those actual actors, those actual human beings, some space to actually contribute to the thing. I think that's another thing. I think I feel like I see so much theater where it feels like it's this like performative wokeness where we hire someone maybe not for the right reasons. And it's, I think that, that's different than actually letting all of the artists in the room have a place at the table, and actually allowing space for those perspectives.
Well, another part of having a place at the table would also be the people who are in charge to have people of color in those positions too.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
that is it. It's a very interesting experience, especially I've had a career as like an ensemblist regionally, and sometimes you end up in a room and you feel like you're powerless, and you're like on this contract. And I've been in situations where I felt really uncomfortable doing some really what I felt was cultural appropriation of movement. We had this beautiful salsa music under us, and we were told to do oles and paso doble steps. And I was just like, this is 3 different countries that you're trying to say are this one thing. And when I took the director out, I didn't do it in rehearsal, did it aside of, and I was told sometimes you just have to shut up and do the step. And then the choreographer, I was like, I would hope at this day and age we could be a little more culturally aware. And the choreographer leaned into my face and told me, I don't have time to be culturally aware. So if that's the mindset that's happening in regional theaters, what do you think that we can do, or what is the message that you would like to send out to people so it could be a more collaborative space in the rehearsal?
Well, if an actor in a show approaches me, I usually take the actor and listen as a director and choreographer. I didn't hire people to be quiet in the room with me. I actually hire people because I want their contribution. Now, you got to understand, I come from a long line of directors and choreographers who didn't work that way. Jerry Robbins, Michael Bennett. My first Broadway choreographer was Agnes DeMille, a very powerful woman, even after a stroke and in a wheelchair. And one of my second choreographers was another strong woman, Anna White. But Anna and even Agnes were much more about collaboration in dialogue at that time. And Michael was also, Jerry took a learning curve. He hadn't been in the theater since the 60s. I think with Fiddler was the last time. Then he went to the ballet world. So when he came to do Jerome Robbins Broadway, he had to learn the rules had changed. He didn't even know you had to have a 10-minute break for the actors or a 5-minute break. I mean, the rules had changed. So we evolve. But I think for me, I'm speaking for myself, the thing I love most is being in the room. And I tend to hire people who I want to spend 8 hours a day with for the next year of my life in one room, and still go out to dinner with them after the rehearsal. So I'm pretty smart about who I choose. And that collaboration, I choose them because I want them to participate, not because I want them to be silent. So my advice to anyone who says that to you as a creative person is it's time for you to actually realize, don't put that pressure on your own shoulders that you have to deliver it all. You have a room full of artists. Use the art that's in the room to create the thing you're trying to create. There's a lot of fabulous stuff in there. Don't let it just don't stifle it and throw it in the corner. What's the point?
Stephanie, you look like you have something to say.
Oh, I was just thinking about your referencing specifically regional theater, and leading Baltimore Center Stage. That's where I live now. I live in the regional theater now, and not New York. And I was just thinking, very, very similar to what Jerry is saying, actually. What Jerry is pointing to is moving from a culture of scarcity to a culture of abundance, knowing and understanding that fear-based leadership, or that's sort of idea that we don't have enough, or I've got to be like the top dog, that sort of toxic hierarchical structure, it doesn't serve any of us. And it's up to everybody in the room, as Jerry is saying, to help co-construct a culture of collaboration and abundance, and a culture that challenges the hierarchical structures that we've all inherited.
That brings me to my next topic. Nina Simone said, it's an artist's duty to reflect the times in which we live. Tony K. Bombara said, it is the job of the writer to make the revolution irresistible. How do you feel that art, specifically theater, plays a role in changing policy? Ooh, not everybody all at once.
Well, I'll just say that my favorite quote that I learned in high school about art was, art is meant to disturb. And that what I took away from that, it was just supposed to like just knock you off, just your sense, just your podium, just a little bit, just to make you think a little bit differently. So you go home and be shifted and changed and moved. And sometimes it does. I think it's sometimes most successful when it does it without you even knowing it. You know.
Well, that's the kind of things. I mean, in musicals, look, when Hairspray happened, you know, it was so much joy in that musical. But when she sang "I Know Where I've Been," and you walked away from it and you thought, this little fat girl wants to integrate social dancing in 1962 on national television, there's a big message there wrapped up in a cotton candy musical. So, and it made a difference. It made a huge difference. We did not have a black president when Hairspray started. We had one before it ended. I mean, that was, and Margot Lyon, God bless her, she was on Barack Obama's team from the very start and all through the arts. You know, so musicals can be entertaining and have a secret message hidden inside of them too.
Nice.
Yeah,
So
I think commercial theater. Sorry, Hector.
No, go ahead.
I think it's Broadway in its commercial theaterism has kind of lost that sense, you know, that Broadway has become more concerned with the mother, father, 2.5 kids coming to Broadway and spending money, as opposed to putting, you know, the pill in the peanut butter, as some people say. And, you know, I think if we can get back to that, if we can make, I think that what was so cool about Hamilton is that Hamilton, at the very least, made education cool. Like, learn, regardless of and the flaws that come with Hamilton, I'm a member, like whatever, like there was something inside of it that was like, oh, there's something for younger people, there's something for older people that I'm going to learn and also be put in a relatively uncomfortable position while being entertained. And sometimes all of that stuff gets thrown away for entertainment factor, glitz and glamour, lights, costumes. And it's like, what are the stories that we're trying to tell? What culture are we trying to push? What I loved about musical theater were the history lessons, you know, the ragtimes and the rents, and, you know, the things that made me learn a little more about myself. And once Broadway can remember who it is and decide to put that forward again, you know, I think, because that happens off Broadway, that happens regionally. It isn't about so much about the dollar in those institutions. So I think we can just care a little more about the medicine we're trying to feed people as opposed to the ice cream. I think we can do that a little better.
You know, I directed South Pacific 2 years ago, and when Cable sings "You've Got to Be Taught," I think Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein, they were really teaching us a lesson.
I was just thinking. Oh, go ahead, Kirsten.
No, Stephanie.
I was just going to offer another quote.
But they were way ahead of their times. You know, you've got to be taught. This soldier in love with a Tonkinese girl, and you've got to be taught to hate. Is you know, the essence of the song. So theater, they've been changing theater a lot. Those iconic American musical.
Stephanie and then Kirsten, sorry.
I was just gonna. You're perfect. This is going great.
We're gonna edit this in post. Don't worry.
It's always a live show. I was gonna offer another quote because you grounded us in such amazing quotes, and I was just gonna offer up a third because I don't speak about these subjects without invoking Adrienne Marie Brown and this quote from her book Emergent Strategy. Oh, look, I have it right here. It's opened up to this page. She says, art is not neutral. It either upholds or disrupts the status quo, advancing or regressing justice. And what I take that to mean is that we're sort of regardless of the content, regardless of the pill and the peanut butter, that every single decision we make when we're telling stories, and if you believe that stories shape the world, as I do, we do, then you gotta believe that everything is connected. And it's the different, it's not a neutral decision to program West Side Story instead of Bubbly Black Girl or instead of Interstate by Melissa Lee and Kit Yan. That is not a neutral decision. You are upholding a thing and regressing a thing to advancing a thing. So that's all. I love my political theater, and I love my my pill and the peanut butter, as Watts said, and still, like, when we put shows on stage that criminalize the Black body, we are regressing justice. That is not a neutral thing, and so there are 1,000 decisions along the way that are not neutral. Not one of them. Over to you, Kirsten.
I was actually almost going to say the exact same thing, except I was going to phrase it, put it in a little different light. I teach musical theater at NYU, and there was a point where there were students who would say, I'm not political, and so I'm not going to write a political musical. And that in itself is political. That is a choice that you are making to say, I don't want to deal with this particular thing, and I don't want people to actually deal with this particular thing. So that is everything that you write is political, whether you want to think of it as being political or not. So that's what I'm what you were saying, but you said it so much more eloquently. And the only reason that I interrupted before was to say that my father named me Kirsten, but nobody could say when I was a little kid outside in the school. So you were wrong. You were not wrong.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. We actually have a fan question. This question is actually coming from Edward Reed from Hoboken, New Jersey. So let's take a look at what he's going to ask.
Interesting theater philosophical question. Let's say you take the play Hamlet, which is set in medieval Denmark, and then you have a completely ethnically diverse cast in live theater now. Is that a version of Hamlet that takes place in an alternate universe where Denmark is a multi-ethnic or diverse society? Or is Denmark still a totally European place in the context of the play, but we're just pretending the actors are just, acting and pretending to be the ancient Denmark people? Philosophical question.
Can somebody repeat what he said, because it kept breaking up for me? I have no idea what he said.
He was asking if you have an ethnically diverse cast doing a show like Macbeth, which is set in a historical... Hamlet, in a place that is historically Caucasian. Is the show in your concept taking place in an alternate universe, or are we pretending that all of these ethnic people are now from this place that they are not?
Did you see Cinderella?
I loved it.
Well, Brandy was Cinderella. Come on, tell the story the way you want to tell the story and cast the people you want to cast to tell it and do it however you want. What's the problem? It's 2020, people.
I love that. I love that. So on that note, what does representation mean to you?
Tell the story the way you want to tell it with the people you want to tell it with, and include the world you live in. That's representation.
Well, I represent my community. At 5 years old, I knew that I was representing Chinatown, New York. And when I was in a chorus line, my entire Chinatown, they were looking to me. So representation means a lot to me. And it's important because I'm representing my community.
Nice. So it's funny. Ken, your last name at birth is Hasija, and I believe you're of Indian descent. A lot of people don't know that about you.
Jerry may, because when I first met Jerry in 1993, whenever it was on Grease, he knew me as, yes, Kenneth Hasija.
His hair was very black.
It was very black, yes.
So if you don't mind asking, what prompted you to change your last name?
Well, look, it's a great example of this business, certainly now and certainly then, which was, it was simple. I wanted to be an actor at that point, like I mentioned. And I mentioned it to somebody in the business, a higher up, and they looked at me and they said, you should change your name. And I said, why? And they said, because people in this business are inherently lazy and they will not want to work to remember it. And you will be passed over. I went home that day and I changed it. And again, just a personal experience. So, you know, look, I'm half Indian. My dad was born, who just passed this March, born and raised in what was then Bombay in 1929 and came here in the 60s. I look like the way I look because he married an Irish lass. And so I have no idea. But even then, that lesson, I remember going like, oh, I'm different. I need to change it. So actually, when I know that happened to me, I get so angry that I didn't realize what would be happening and what is happening to other cultures that were so much more marginalized than a half Indian kid. Like, and I think that's for those of us who do look like me, who are half, like, if you've ever felt it, and you have at some point. I grew up in a very Catholic, waspy community, and I felt a little different. So this is where I beat myself up for not recognizing earlier what so many of other people have had to go through.
It's really interesting. I think of the line in On Your Feet when Emilio says, change my name. It's not my name to change. It was my father's name. It was my grandfather's name, who we left back in Cuba to come here and start a better life. So to me, I just feel like there's so much power in the name, and its representation in that being on the bill, like seeing Gomez on a bill, seeing Flores, seeing Ibarra on the bill, seeing Lee, you know, I think that is something that is really important, especially today. And I was having a talk with a roommate a while ago about naming one's children, and that if you were to name your children, we heard somewhere that if you name your children a more Caucasian name, that they would have an easier-ish life based on how it reads on paper. And I was like, that's nonsense. Like my kid's gonna be Alicia Marie. Like she's gonna have so much name. What do you feel is the power in a name?
African Americans don't get that though. This isn't our name. This Watts isn't my name. It's not my family's name. You know, so it's like a thing that, yeah, that's all. Like you have to you try to empower that, you know, as much as you can, as best you can. You try to take as much ownership of that name, even though it was never yours to begin with. You know, I try to take Watts and, but yeah, I illuminate things. Watts words. You know, I tried. You know, and it's hard sometimes. Like I forget. Like this isn't my name. This isn't my. I don't know my name. You know, and I just sometimes it's necessary.
That's a real deep.
Well, I'm glad there's only one Bayor. And
Nice.
she's been around a long time.
So I've got one last question here. So Joe Iconis, the New York Times has called you the future of musical theater. Bearing that title, I'd like to know what you think the future of musical theater looks and sounds like.
Oh, I mean, I definitely don't. I don't know, but I mean, I hope that the future of musical theater, you know, looks and sounds like a million different people who don't look or sound like me. You know, I hope that the future of musical theater is a whole bunch of different voices getting a platform to be heard, and I hope that of those voices there are you know, people who are making musicals that are big, splashy Broadway spectacles, and there are people who are making weirdo, you know, little musicals about human beings, and there are people making political art that's like wearing it on the surface, and people making political art that's like Trojan horsing it in. I hope my dream is that it's all of that, and that the Broadway, this idea of Broadway, which is different than theater, but Broadway is an umbrella, a container that can hold all of that. I think that's my hope, and I just hope that like the people who have the power, the people who got the money, will support that, because it's like there are people making incredible art. There are musical theater writers who have such specific perspectives that are all over the place, and they're making beautiful stuff. It's there. It's just nobody knows what the fuck it is because it's not produced. It's not supported. And so I think that the stuff is there for the taking. And my hope for the future of Broadway is that the people who can amplify those voices and can give a stage, a literal stage, to the writers of today and tomorrow, that those people do.
I have thought about the future of musical theater. It would be lovely if not only the writers, but the owners of the theaters reflected the different ethnicities and, genders, basically the people in power decide what is going to be happening. So the producers, if there were more producers of color, if there were more theater owners of color, if there were more, you name it, people in power of color, that would be a really lovely future that you could see.
That part.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're about an hour in. That's our show for tonight. And I'd like to thank the panel for joining us tonight, for taking the time to come to the barn and hang out with me for a little bit. We'd like to thank New York Theater Barn for producing this event, and our Associate Artistic Director, Jen Sandler, for being our backstage manager, making all these things happen. And the biggest thank you to you, the people who came and supported this show and the development of new musicals. Thank you, panelists. I'll see you backstage. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Round about the beacon we go, taking our time, basking at fireflies, singing the songs that we already know. It's part of the story been told round the fire of the sweet willow. And I will just follow her to the beacon of something of a home in the sweet willow. And we are forever young. Our tale goes on and on. Take a breath, take my hand, we're on our sacred land. Feel the beating rhythm of the heart beneath our feet. Stories can be captured and colonized, they never die. So feel the spirit whisper through the trees like it's just for me. I have never wandered slightly off the path. Could it be I wish to run away and never turn my back? And what may I find? Could it be that I am not alone? In this willow tree I call home. Will I look back on my life, regretting the years on my own? I've always wanted a place to call home. Round about the willow, I know I'm never alone. Friends of the forest are friends of my own. Sit by the stream, tossing pebbles and hoping that time will slow down by the sweet willow. Round about the beacon we go, taking our time, basking at fireflies, singing the songs that we already know. It's part of the story been told round the fire. It's part of the story been told round the fire of the sweet willow.